Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, comrades, hello to the live broadcast. Your favorite show, 60 Minutes, is a special issue, so with Sheikh, they created it first. Now they are deliberately prolonging the conflict in Ukraine. The statement was made by Defense Minister Shoigu at a meeting of heads of military departments of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization member states in Astana. Shoigu pointed out that in order to achieve its goals, Washington is exerting unprecedented pressure, including pressure on its partners. Emphasized that Russia has never There is no threat, and NATO has no interest in attacking EU countries. On the contrary, the troops of the alliance countries approach the Russian border, posing an additional threat to military security. Shoigu also pointed out that foreign advisors were involved in preparing for the sabotage activities carried out by Kiev in Russia, and Western weapons were used to attack our civilian infrastructure, but the Russian army was in any case. Footage of Tula paratroopers working at night to destroy Ukrainian militant strongholds in the north shows that the Ministry of Defense will achieve all the goals of the special operation. As the armor commander of the group with the call sign DOK said, the 4M infantry fighting vehicle's 100mm cannon left no chance to dry up and cut off the entire enemy unit. Behind Oshele, the Russian army is under pressure from two directions at the same time, from Arkhangelsk to Solovyov in the south, and serious fighting is taking place there at this moment. Our soldiers have occupied the streets for 40 years of victory. The idea of both settlements will open a direct road to Novopokrovskoye and Novoselo. These are important logistics points of the Ukrainian armed forces in this part of the front line, but the footage of our army aviation work was destroyed by the 305 light multi-purpose guided missile. The enemy's operator observation post is tirelessly in the air, and tactical aviation is constantly flying at the enemy's position in New York, which will soon become Novgorod again. 500 gliding drones are constantly arriving, conducting objective control, recording the direct attack of aerial bombs on militants during the day. So is the night. Here's another new thing from our engineers, who are already capturing enemy equipment on the front line, a unique drone. Let's call his net Honey. He tracks the enemy, flies to them from above, releases the net, and then the enemy bird just falls. German propagandist 300 Fanner spoke about this on the Guelph television channel, and he was not surprised by the abundance of various forgery and performance options of Russian BP at night. Shoigu today at a meeting of defense ministers of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization member states, his statement as Secretary of Defense.
The goal of the United States, which was first created, is now deliberately prolonging the conflict in Ukraine. The collective West continues to supply Kiev with weapons, and intelligence is transmitted in real time, which is said to show an escalation desire. Organize the training of Ukrainian military personnel in the war zone. There are Western military experts and mercenaries. With the direct participation of the advisors, the sabotage was planned and prepared, including in Russia. Kiev uses Western consent almost every day. Weapons received from him for the purpose of damaging civilian infrastructure in the Russian Federation. The Russian armed forces continue to effectively carry out special military operations. All goals will be achieved.
The politician wrote that the United States will announce a new $6 billion aid package for Ukraine today under its website program. It will include Patriot Timer Sleep Suns missiles, artillery ammunition, anti-drone and missile drones, and the Pentagon has announced that it has begun the process of transferring weapons from the new aid package to Ukraine. Some of the promised will arrive within days, if not earlier. Such actions by the US authorities are not in any way consistent with their statement that they want peace in Ukraine. What? The longer they can fire at the Ukrainian armed forces, the farther they must be driven away from the new Russian region and increase the sanitary area. The Washington Post wrote that the Kremlin commented on Kiev's secret supply of long-range missiles to the United States. Most of the money allocated to Kiev will be spent in the United States. That is, it will be transferred to defense companies to produce weapons for the Ukrainian armed forces. Two-thirds of the money was allegedly used in Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, according to the newspaper. In fact, they will aim to create new jobs in the SHA and develop the SH. But in order to keep the money flowing, the Americans decided to send their additional military advisors to the Special Operations Zone. Will they control weapons? Will they go to the front line to ensure that Ukrainians do not destroy expensive equipment? The Pentagon was defended a day in advance, they said, and very few people would be sent. They won't even get close to the front line. However, Iskander's caliber will also reach the table of American advisors. But Sweden, a new NATO member, is sending troops from Latvia. Of course, in order to contain Russia, Reuters reported that by the beginning of the 20th year, Stockholm will deploy the Baltic states and a group of heavy armored vehicles, including BMP-AS and 90 and German Cat, Leopard tanks and Swedish armored vehicles. Western propagandists have flaunted it as the best in the world. Our military has burned some specimens in special operations areas many times, and 90 Leopards will be exhibited at the Ministry of Defense exhibition. The Poklonaya Gora Victory Party was hysterical about this, and Bell propagandist Julian Repke saw the Russians display German trophy equipment in Moscow. He began to scream at Putin's propaganda show on May 9th, but at least remembered that the Soviet Union had defeated Nazi Germany. William Lapland, the U.S. Undersecretary of Defense for Support, is also unhappy with the insidious Russians, they say, with their aggressive systems. The Russian army wrapped James DeBille's clever American bomb and ruthlessly silenced it, so that Wunderwald, who handed over Vika Nuland to Kiev, was absolutely ineffective on the battlefield in fear of Russian electronic warfare and telegrams. The newspaper complained that the Russians easily blocked Western aircraft from navigating over the Baltic Sea. Like, in the past 8 months alone, Russia has shot down 46,000 planes. It's not just about anal disconnection of GPS signals, but or sending false signals to shoot down aircraft from course. The British Defense Secretary is said to have even become a victim of Russian jamming as he flew near Kaliningrad. Our RAP suppressed the navigation system of an enemy officer aboard a RAF aircraft. Western paranoia about Russian technological secrets has reached the United Nations, and Linda Thomas Greenfield, the United States permanent representative to the organization, suspects Moscow is hiding something. After we are aware of the draft resolution on the non-deployment of nuclear weapons in outer space, the document was supported by 13 countries. China abstained, only Russia opposed it, but not because it wanted to militarize space, as it tried to turn the situation around. Washington is very cunning before the Moscow-Beijing vote. They proposed an amendment to the resolution. The amendment means banning the deployment of absolutely all types of weapons in space, not just nuclear weapons. This amendment was rejected by the Americans, that is, the United States will deploy weapons in space, but the White House is very worried about this. Biden's security advisor, Ponas Jack Sullivan, said Russia is developing a new satellite weapon that can carry. Nuclear charges are very afraid of them, although Putin bluntly said in the Security Council 2 months ago that Moscow has no such plans. Such statements are filled by Americans. The rapid development of China's space program has disturbed the wild, and the Pentagon is already preparing to fight China in orbit. While the Biden administration is trying to foment conflict in space, Trump plans to use the dollar more aggressively as a weapon. Advisors to the former president are discussing the possibility of imposing sanctions on countries that refuse to use the dollar, Bloomberg reported. Among the options are export controls, currency manipulation fees, and tariffs. This is a world order based on Washington rules, which no longer conceals its role as a global gendarmerie. As Gogol wrote, it puts lanterns under everyone's eyes for order. The BRICS countries, which are actively switching to their own currencies in bilateral trade, are at risk of being the first to be sanctioned by the Trump administration, and the BRICS countries discussed de-dollarizing and protecting the dollar at a summit last August. Trump is actively using Mouse Biden as his trump card in the race. The dollar will no longer be the world's reserve currency, and Trump will also be the greatest failure in American history. According to reports, many Americans no longer like Donald or Joe. Многим американцам не по душе уже ни Дональд, ни Джо, сообщает The Hill. Opinion polls show 62% of Biden supporters. More than a third of Trappists would prefer to replace both candidates. The President of the United States, Americans are so disappointed with their policies that 30% of the people don't care at all who will win the presidential race. But of course, it's important for its participants themselves, they wrote. And the Biden campaign continues and has invested a lot of money there. Hollywood's elite plans to hold a star fundraiser in June. В июне запланирован звездный сбор средств, в котором примут участие George Clooney and Julia Roberts will attend in the morning. Former U.S. President Barack Obama, former Disney boss Jeffrey Katzenberg. For Trump, oligarchs and strangely ordinary workers, he met them on a construction site in traditionally Democratic New York and apparently got along with them. Anyway, when the reporter asked one of the builders to tell Biden, he suggested that Joe go to 3 letters. Democrats continue to exhaust Donald with legal action so he doesn't have time to campaign. Trump himself called it a witch hunt. Сам Трамп называет это охотой на ведьм. The number of shoplifts in England and Wales has reached its highest level in 20 years, The Independent said, citing data from the Office for National Statistics. Last year, 430,000 such crimes were recorded, an increase of 37%. More and more bandits are taking our other weapons with them, and the number of heavily armed robberies has increased by 20%. Businessmen complained about the inability of the police to restore order to the streets, like Bobby was lazy and provided. The Independent wrote that in the context of the inaction of security forces, thieves have become bolder and more aggressive, and entrepreneurs' losses from theft have doubled in a year to £5 billion. The Times cited another shocking number of England's degradation. Britain has the worst drinking rate among 11-year-olds in the world, with 1 in 3 Britons drinking alcohol. В 11 лет выпивает каждый третий британец. В 13 уже половина. 13 is half. Against this backdrop, it may not be surprising that the number of homeless people in a country that is growing rapidly has increased by 40% in 5 years. Many Britons simply don't have enough money to afford housing. In Paris, the famous Moulin Rouge cabaret mill fell off its wings and ripped off several letters with the institution's logo. The incident occurred after the cabaret closed, so there were no casualties, and the wreckage was quickly removed, but the cause of the emergency has not yet been determined. So far, the only serious accident in history began in 1889. In 1915, the Moulin Rouge Fire 15 and the cabaret had to be closed for 9 years. In general, on the eve of the Paris Olympics, the city's symbols are falling apart. He also has good sports in neighboring Germany. Payer's publication, Guimen Kaitong, found a surprising problem, worrying that few professional footballers are gay, saying that only 4 out of 300,000 players openly recognize non-traditional tendencies. What is it? But things will change soon. The newspaper announced a large-scale commemoration of German footballers, which has been set on May 17th after marijuana was legalized and gender change allowed once a year. Passports, the Germans hit all the heavy shops in Berlin and Brandenburg. Police found a large amount of cocaine hidden in boxes under fruit, placed in supermarket chains. In one store alone, security forces seized 20 to 100 kilograms of drugs. Urgent news. The FSB released footage of the detention of 2 members of neo-Nazi groups preparing terrorist attacks in the Volgograd region. Security forces have arrested members of a group of outlawed pro-Ukrainian group, White Power Listen Doctrine, in the Ukrainian city of Volzhsky. They received detailed instructions to make bombs. A police station in Volzhsky and the local military registration and conscription office were planned to be blown up. In addition, they found a kind of reward for arranging terrorist attacks in crowded places among Nazi detainees. Uranium table, prices for various sabotage in Russia, reconnaissance of strategic facilities, $100 for sabotage of railways, $500 for arson of military registration and conscription office, $1,000 Ukrainian curators also paid for arson of Russian military houses and cars, and the Nazis were offered a percentage of their crime fees for recruiting new terrorists.